Hey, what up, y'all? It is me, once again, back at it. I'm Theo E.J. Wilson. And somebody said something interesting today. They asked a question that I never had really considered. And that is, they began to ask me, like, when you look at biblical prophecy, and when you look at the behavior that Donald Trump is exhibiting, is it possible that this dude is the predicted Antichrist? I was like, damn, son. Like, that's like, and I'm not a biblical cat. Like, I don't get into prophecy. I don't get into things that have to do with trying to predict the future and going into who's right and who's wrong about religion. That's not my thing. But I started to consider it from a philosophical standpoint. Number one, that thing about him being the chosen one, that was deep. That was deep. Like he literally was like, "I am the chosen." I'm like, "Who the fuck are you talking to, bro? That shit is crazy." Like nobody says that shit, dude. Nobody says that shit. Like nobody be like, "I am the chosen one." Like word is bond. That shit weird to me, right? And then he goes off and there's some evangelical that said that he was some kind of manifestation of a biblical prophecy. Some evangelical got to talking to Trump and got in his ear about him being someone who is predicted, you know what I'm saying, the king of the Jews or something like that. And I said, this is interesting because I've long held a theory that evangelicals support Donald Trump and psychotic, narcissistic, megalomaniac preachers because a lot of their behavior is modeled after Old Testament Yahweh. If you think about it, most dictators, most psychotic madmen, most strongmen model themselves after old school Bible descriptions of God. Now, I'm not talking about if there is a universal force. I'm not here to argue about that, all right? And I'm going to distinguish this from like Christ and the metaphor of Christ, you know what I'm saying, being the consciousness of love and all. I ain't talking about that, right? I'm talking about the idea that your boy Donald Trump and people like that are kind of like Yahweh. I ran across this one video that said that the description of God, the Old Testament God, is the most evil possible being, right? And I was like, this is a pretty interesting video, right? The description of Old Testament God is that whoever this cat is, right, his body count is like 10 times as high as the devil's, right? And that he literally, if you were going to follow his example, you'd end up in prison. God condones murder, he condones genocide, he condones rape, molestation, freaking incest, like you name it. All of that's condoned in the Old Testament. The issue is that when strong men take their cues from the Bible or descriptions of God or want to embody some kind of prophecy, you know what I mean? They often end up behaving the same way that a lot of these preachers do. The con man, so clear. Like I never understood how anybody could fall for Donald Trump. Like it's like a used car. So like I wouldn't buy a car from this dude. Like I wouldn't let this dude babysit my kids, let alone a nuclear weapon. You see what I'm saying? Like that's the kind of insanity that we're talking about, in my opinion. So I think that it's deep to me that a lot of the people who are in Donald Trump's camp are evangelicals who support guys who are clearly con men, like some of these prosperity gospel preachers. Same dude to me, fucked up hair and everything, like the same kind of idea of this charismatic, if you call that charisma, magnetized figure that brings people to him and ultimately unleashes their like worst demons, like unleashes the worst parts of themselves. You know what I'm saying? Like people ain't following Donald Trump by following the angels. You know what I'm saying? People be like, nah, you don't even fit the description of somebody who like should be a Christ-like person. Like, motherfucker, you got all kinds of affairs going on, lots of babies, mamas. Like you wouldn't tolerate Barack Obama being the president with his wife with nudie pics all over the internet. And, he got 5 kids from 3 different women. That's the same, right? You wouldn't do that. Yeah, and still, the same mindset that allows them to fall for these preacher types allows the evangelical base to often fall for Donald Trump. I think it's kind of interesting. Now take a look at this, right? The thing about the evangelicals, you know what I mean, is that there are believers in end time prophecy. End time prophecy is problematic as shit because end time prophecy literally is the end of the world. And unconsciously, they want the end of the world. Unconsciously, evangelicals want the world to end. And so, therefore, unconsciously, they kind of might be drawn to somebody that actually make that happen. If you really think about it, evangelicals might be drawn to somebody who actually could kick off the end of the fucking world. Fuck what the rest of us think. Like, they could actually unconsciously select someone who has the personality traits and the dangerous enough reach and the dangerous enough ideas to actually tip over the balance of the world. And what's so interesting about Donald Trump is that, like, if you read about what the Antichrist was supposed to be, like, the dude kind of fits the description if you into that kind of biblical prophecy, if that's the thing for you. It may not be the thing for you, but biblically speaking, you know what I'm saying? He was supposed to be somebody well loved by the people. Like, you could say he was well loved during the apprentice times. You see what I'm saying? Like, raised in Rome, right? Rome technically, hypothetically, is America, blah, 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 right? And, you know, people who think that Trump is encountering opposition, people who are in his camp, say he's encountering opposition because they don't like how he challenges the system. He's not in the pocket of the big banks. He's not in the pocket of the deep state and all that shit, right? That's the ideas that folks have around why Trump is the right person for the job. But actually, what I think is so crazy about this whole thing is that when you think that somebody is going to bring about end times, you want to do it for a reason. Why do evangelicals want the end of the world to happen? I believe the evangelicals want the end of the world to happen because, according to Bible prophecy, that's when they get proven right about everything. Every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess, right? Evangelicals, according to their scripture, when the end of the world comes and all is wiped away, you know what I mean? They're the ones that are going to be standing in heaven. They're the ones who are going to be raptured up and all the beasts will be revealed and all this extra shit. They'll be proven right, right? They'll be proven right. And that, to me, is one of the most dangerous things, the desire to be right, rather than to have a world that works for all of us. And that is one of the, hey, what's up? How y'all doing? Good to see y'all coming on in here, right? So what's interesting about Donald Trump, too, is that his consciousness, see, the Antichrist idea, if you believe in that kind of thing, is more an idea about consciousness. And his consciousness is influencing the world, no question, especially this rash of far right wing leaders that have suddenly popped up in the last few years, really. You know what I'm saying? People see parallels to him in Boris Johnson in Great Britain. You know, he's got this affinity for Kim Jong-un and all of these psychos over there who are dictators. But specifically, he also seems to have influenced the rise of the president of Brazil. The president of Brazil, who just authorized all the clearing and burning of the Amazon forest, right? The lungs of the planet. Farthest right guy that Brazil has had in a long ass time, right? Modeled in the consciousness of Donald Trump, the consciousness that brings these far right leaders to the forefront. You see what I'm saying? Like, this dude, the president of Brazil, is like Trump in that he don't give a fuck about the environment. Like, Trump just signed some legislation that just was like, man, screw the environment, including bald eagles, like our national symbol. Like you ain't gonna have no bald eagles left after he's done. Well, the president of Brazil is like, man, look, fuck this forest shit. Y'all go clear that out to make some farmland, to make some grazing territory, to make some kind of land for the soybeans and the cash crops that the Brazilian the economy depends on. That thinking to me is Antichrist-like, you could say. And I define, you can't define Antichrist without defining what I call Christ consciousness. This is just philosophy here. I'm not necessarily a believer, but entertain with me for a second. That something called Christ consciousness is about love. Christ means Christos, crystallization. It's about human beings reaching their pinnacle, their full potential. And you can't do that without like an open heart. You can't do that without seeing your brothers and sisters as a part of you, right? There's no duality thinking in Christ consciousness if you believe in that kind of thing. If you believe in that kind of thing, then you see one as the other. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Look, I don't care what you believe. These are good principles to live by. These are good things to like obey in your walk in life, right? So if a leader is influencing the world to not think like that, and to fall into duality thinking and to polarize the world, to polarize those folks, then it really will become something that is against Christ consciousness, against, other words, anti. You see what I'm saying? And it's a terrifying thing when you look at it. You know, I don't know how long it would take nature to regrow the majesty of the Amazon forest, right? I don't know how much damage is going to be done now that Trump's rolled back this legislation. You know, I am, like I said, not, let's say, a religious person, but I do believe in a higher good. And the higher good that I believe in is that ultimately we are inseparable. We live in a universe. We stuck on the same planet with these people, right? Like them, hate them. Don't motherfucking matter. If you black, I don't fuck with white people. If you white people, you don't fuck with black people. You all breathe the same oxygen, literally. We all share the same, like literally, you will breathe an atom of somebody, literally of everyone on earth before a year is done. So we're literally connected. Like the water that's in my body was once in a white person's body, was once in a Native American person's body. See what I'm saying? Like we're literally all one. And that actually is the deepest truth, right? And any consciousness that says that I can affect the biosphere, I can affect humanity in a way that makes it look like we're separate, makes it look like, you know what I'm saying? Like what I do over here don't fuck with them people over there and that we don't influence each other. That's duality thinking. And that shit is crazy. What do you say? Tanya says, Miss Espinosa, you say, Trump loves to play the victim mentality. He is the first person championing for them. For years, they have been the real oppressed people. For years, they've been the real oppressed people. Let's see. Hold on, who you talking about, babe? The ones who's the quote unquote real oppressed people. Hey, so yeah, it's like I will say this. The Jewish community did not take kindly to his questioning of loyalty. I didn't even notice that, like, the questioning of loyalty is a long known racist trope against Jewish people. I didn't know that, but apparently the Anti-Defamation League was like, fuck you, Trump. Can't be saying shit like that. Saying that, you know, you're disloyal to Israel if you vote for Democrats and things like that. That's insane. See what I'm saying? I think that what happens in the world is there is a pendulum that swings. I talk about this all the time. There's a pendulum. Force breeds counterforce. Trump supporters think they are the real oppressed people because affirmative action was working against them. I've heard that too before, Ms. Espinosa. I've actually heard that. You know what I'm saying? This is what I'll say to Trump supporters who think that affirmative action is oppression. Affirmative action is not oppression. Affirmative action is a correction to oppression. It's really reparations light. You know what I'm saying? And for example, you could look at slavery as a whites-only affirmative action program. You could. I'm reading a great book. Do I got a copy around here? A great book called The Color of Law. And The Color of Law talks about how racist housing policies locked wealth in place for white America for centuries. Like up until like literally like the 21st century. We're talking about like it tracks up into the racist mortgage lending practices in the Obama era / Bush era that took half of Black wealth during the financial crisis. You see what I'm saying? Like, so whites only affirmative action is literally what got America to be America. When you look at the Homestead Act of 1862, and how all of this land newly stolen from Native Americans was now available in land grant colleges for white immigrants and white folks who was native born to America. That's a whites only affirmative action program. There's no amount of affirmative action right now that could happen in America that could counteract what whites have just had exclusive access to for literally hundreds of years, all right? So yeah, they're complaining about literally a leveling and like not even a good leveling of playing field. So I've heard it said that those who believe, to those who are privileged, equality looks like oppression. To those who are privileged, equality, when shit starts to balance out, it looks like oppression to them because they've always been on this end of the seesaw. So if you go like this, naturally they've got to kind of come down a little bit. But it's the problem that the people down here have been living in shit. You know what I'm saying? The boot has been on their neck. So yeah, I've definitely heard that, Queen. Black and brown people always play the race card, but we are the ones always, yeah. Nah. The fact is that the race card is always getting played against us covertly, and we call it out overtly. That's what's going on. The race card gets played against us covertly, and we have to call it out overtly. Because if we don't call it out overtly, then the blind spot that most European Americans have will just kind of kick that shit to the background and shit. But yeah, man, racism is a part of it, of Antichrist consciousness. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's color coded tribalism, ultimately. Is Bronze Age anthropology. It has nothing to do with the reality of who we are as folks. Yes, there are differences between somebody born in Sudan versus somebody born in, let's say, Sweden, right? Well, somebody who evolved there and indigenous to there, right? Yes, there's physical differences between these people. But what we've made of those physical differences, so we say what white supremacist racism has made of those differences is just wasteful of human potential. So getting back to Donald Trump being the Antichrist and shit. I think that it's important to understand that when I say the Antichrist, I mean his behavior and what he's unleashing onto the world is literally Antichrist consciousness. It's against love, it's against holistic, it's against harmonious life on earth. You see what I'm saying? But as the pendulum swings one way, the pendulum swings back the other way as well. And so force breeds counterforce. I always say that, right? That's Taoism. That shit made so much sense to me. The very seeds of the destruction of what Trump's trying to implement across the world are already taking root. You see what I'm saying? And I would think that the big picture is that human beings got to learn the motherfucking hard way. Human beings learn the hard way. Unfortunately, it is what it is, right? So human beings, we are people who are either motivated by pain or trying to motivated towards pleasure or trying to run away from pain. Maybe all this shit's going wrong in the world to show us our true capability of changing the world. Like, for example, Amazon's burning, it's fucked up, right? That shit scared the shit out of me when I saw exactly the vastness. That's the lungs of the planet. That's the only thing taking CO2 out of the motherfucking atmosphere, right? But I am encouraged by the Green Belt movement. A lot of people don't know about the Green Belt movement, right? So you say that the Amazon's burning, right? And it's burning because the dude who's president of Brazil is a lot like Donald Trump, you know what I'm saying? The motherfucking far right crazy son bitch, right? But also Wangari Maathai in Kenya started the Green Belt movement. And what she did was her and her Green Belt folks planted 30 million trees. Just planted 30 million trees, right? And that had so many predicted effects. Like, first of all, the water table rose because the roots held the water in place, right? Which powered the hydroelectric dam, which caused more power to be on during more parts of the day, which had more water flowing so that people could bathe themselves, which cuts down on communicable diseases and things that are preventable in the Western world that aren't often preventable in the third world. So these things can happen, right? People say one of the greatest threats to the planet right now is overpopulation. Well, overpopulation is only a problem if you're looking at 7.5 to 8 billion consumers. But if the culture changes so that we stop being consumers and start being stewards, then what you have is, if it's 7 billion people, that's 14 billion hands on deck to make this planet great again. Meaning that's more hands to plant. That's more folks to, that's more minds to, like, you know what I'm saying, like engineer ways to repopulate certain endangered species. That's more folks that's coming up with inventions to clean out the oceans, you know what I'm saying, to figure out what to do and repurpose this plastic that's out in the biosphere. You feel me? Like, all of these hands on deck, if we start thinking like freaking stewards rather than consumers, that's actually a beautiful thing, right? So all that's happening in the wake of what Trump is doing. That's why I'm encouraged by what I see. A lot of people think that the good things are going unnoticed. They're not going unnoticed, man. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be a lot of beautiful shit that happens. It's going to get fucked up before it goes down. But that anti-Christ-like energy, that fucking megalomania narcissist shit that he's on, man, it's just proving why we need mentally stable people to be in charge of government. You see what I'm saying? And I think that that's very encouraging. So is the motherfucker Antichrist? I'm not like a Bible believer like that. I do believe that he is unleashing Antichrist-like energy into the world, and a lot of leaders are following suit, but that's going to have a counterbalance. And when that counterbalance comes, you need to be a part of it, folks. You right there. Y'all need to be a part of the counterbalance. The thing that brings forth finally, the thing that's going to make the planet a more hospitable place. Like, you know what I'm saying? We got kids out here. You know what I mean? So when we do that, when we start to actually unleash the power of our positivity. It's going to be some hard work. We're going to bust our ass. It's going to be a whole lot of things. You know what I'm saying? Trump was an overcorrection. Correct. He was an overcorrection. Van Jones talked about that. Van Jones talks about how he was a white lash, a backlash to Obama. White America was like, oh, we can't have a Negro. Oh, shit, we got to get the most fucking opposite of Trump, Obama that we can, right? True that. But overcorrection is imbalanced. It's up to us to do the harmonious, balanced thing, right? So even if the motherfucker is the Antichrist, even if this fool is supposed to do something that might tip over the balance of the world, those of us who survive, those of us who make it through, are going to be tasked with actually learning from the history that's being written now. And I think that that's a place that we could be encouraged. I think that's a place that we could actually look at and say, this is going to be a beautiful thing once we do get it right. Do I have a 2020 candidate? You know what? I'm still playing the field. I'm still dating these folks. You know what I'm saying? I ain't really committed to none of them yet. I'm just dating them. But I think that I still like Elizabeth Warren's ideas. I like Bernie Sanders. Like, I think that Julian Castro has done some good shit. I think you have to figure out. Yes, he was, but this one I'll overcorrect back. It's all about finding that center. You know what I'm saying? It's all about finding that the middle ground. What's interesting is that I'm looking for who has two things: the best environmental policy and a realistic approach to addressing the systemic racism that Black folks have endured, because that's a real motherfucking thing. You know what I mean? So, but other things you got to look at in candidates is habits. Habits. Candidates bring their habits to the table. Fuck their rhetoric. What do they leave in their wake? You know what I mean? Like, Trump was predictable. I don't know. All these people are like, I used to believe in Trump, but now I'm just so disappointed. How the fuck are you disappointed in Trump? You couldn't see this shit happen? Like, you couldn't smell the con man and the greasiness of his hair? Habits. Who has he always been? Who has this leader always been? Because that's who the fuck they're bringing to the table, okay? So, for example, Trump was always a malignant narcissist. Always, right? Like, if you look, like, there was a documentary made on Trump. Y'all gotta find this because it's on YouTube. There's a documentary made on Trump that was made at the end of the 80s, right? Where this motherfucker had, risen and fallen in grace in New York nightlife. This was made in made in the early 90s. When the first time he went bankrupt, he bankrupted everything he ever touched. He's bringing that habit into the White House. He's been a cheater. All of us, every wife the motherfucker had has been part of an affair that was started under the previous wife. He's always been that way. Means he lacks integrity. He's bringing that to the table. See what I'm saying? So what I'm looking for in a candidate is their habits. Who has this motherfucker always been? That's who they're bringing. I don't care about their rhetoric. Look at their habits, okay? So, for example, Barack Obama, when he got elected, Ralph Nader was interviewed talking about, do you think that Obama was going to bring hope and change and shit? And Ralph Nader said, nah, he's not going to do it. Why? Because he doesn't have the personality traits that are challenging. In order to correct what Bush did, right? Because Obama was following Bush, he said, you got to have a challenging personality. Obama don't got that, right? And he was right. All Obama ever did was collaborate with people, which is good. He's a community organizer, right? So he's bringing the collaboration skill to the table. But Obama never was like a challenger. He never was like a old school alpha male that'll just knock you upside your head and take what the fuck he wants, right? So Trump has always been Trump. A presidential candidate brings to the table who they've always been, right? Bernie's been Bernie since forever. That's my dude. I can't lie. Like, Bernie still got my attention. What I didn't like about Bernie is that I don't think that he should have succumbed to the pressure that he was under during the Democratic National Convention in 2016. I think Bernie actually should have bucked back, like, hey, you motherfuckers, you know what I'm saying? Like, don't y'all try to steal these states from me that I actually won. And all Bernie had to get on that mic was like, y'all lying. I won this state. I won that state. I won that state, right? And it would have encouraged his base. Because Bernie kind of cowed out and kind of bowed out, a lot of Democratic voters stayed home. They're like, man, I believed in Bernie. If Bernie ain't shit, Bernie ain't going to happen. The whole system's fucked up. And they stayed their ass home. So a lot of that Trump getting elected was on Bernie because Bernie didn't actually rise up at the Democratic National Convention, be like, Hillary, you lying heifer, you stealing these states that I actually won. Does that make sense? So that's the only chink in Bernie's armor that I do have a problem with. You know what I mean? Elizabeth Warren says she was like Native American. I guess like she had thought she was Native American for all these years and shit, but it turned out the DNA test was like, yeah, you're like 0.4% Native American. And she was like, oh. But at least she did own that shit. She just spoke at a convention of Native American nations and she was like, look, my bad. You know what I mean? I like that habit, Miss Warren, because you can what? Admit that you're wrong, correct yourself, and come back stronger. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I saw when they first did their Flint. Yeah, that's when they stole the nomination from Bernie. Yeah, they stole the nomination from Bernie. And Bernie had a chance at the Democratic National Convention in 2016 to be like, fuck y'all, give me these states. I want them. So he kind of allowed that. You know what I mean? Bernie, you know what I mean? But I'm looking at habits. Whenever you're looking at a candidate, look for habits. Trump's habits have always been Trump. He always been the motherfucker he is. That's just what it is. Trump can't help it. You know what I'm saying? So since he's always had integrity, since he's always been a narcissist, since he's always been a borderline sociopath, all of these things are coming to the forefront now. And when you put somebody in the presidential institution, that becomes something of a super suit. It's like putting a motherfucker inside of Iron Man's suit, and then he's got all these capabilities. That's what it's like to elect somebody as president. The president and the presidency are two different things. You know what I'm saying? Like Barack Obama is a person who's been elected president. The presidency is the mechanisms that have been set up of government. See what I'm saying? So now Barack Obama, he's an ex-president, but he's not in the president's suit no more. You got to look at the presidency like an Iron Man suit. When you put this motherfucking shit on somebody, it's going to start having consequences based on how they use the power, right? And they're only going to use based on their habits. So I'm looking at habits. Trump has always been the asshole, always. He lied, like, for example, and his line is like ridiculous. Like, he says that Trump Tower in New York is 10 stories taller than it is. Like, it just go from like floor 50 to floor 60, like in one floor. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's nuts. That's crazy. Like, how can you just bend? Like, he's like, fuck reality. It's how tall I say it is. That's crazy. That's crazy. You see what I mean? He's bringing that to the super suit. Presidency is a super suit. It just enhances your character. It has these ripple effects that are consequential across history. This motherfucker been a serial tweeter. That's who he's always been. So when he becomes president, his tweets are affecting policies, affecting the stock market. It's affecting, international trade relations. Why? Because that's what the presidency is, and that's what he brought into the supersuit. That is the presidency, right? If he's always been evil, he's always been self-possessive, he's always been somebody that doesn't look out for anybody but himself, well, that's what he's bringing to the supersuit, right? So it's power. It's power and habit put together. That's what we got to start looking at in our leaders. And the forces that have always been operating in his character are against life. They are against love. They're against harmony. Therefore, it could be said metaphorically that they are Antichrist-like forces. What the fuck are we going to do about it? Well, I'll tell you this. We're going to pull up our boots and we're going to get to work. This world needs rebuilding, folks. This world needs replenishing. He is Antichrist. Dying to the Father, Son, and Because not only is the most depraved of all sinners, but emanation from the pit itself. Elisa? Yeah. Yeah, like, absolutely. Like, that's exactly like what he's behaving as. You see what I'm saying? And a lot of the reason why he's there is because some of us Bernie supporting motherfuckers didn't show up to the polls. It's real shit. Elections have consequences. Voting has consequences. Staying home has consequences. You see what I'm saying? Yeah, we were disheartened about what the DNC did to Bernie Sanders. Stayed our asses home, and that's what happened. You know what I mean? So it's just got to be said that now we've learned our lesson. The pendulum has swung one way, and it's going to swing the other direction. Now we have to exercise the necessary force to make a balanced equation so that we can have a sustainable world. That's the only shit that matters right now, a sustainable world. What's up? Yeah, I know she made a big mistake with that. Yeah, I think. Yeah. I think you're right. That's what I'm saying. Elizabeth Warren, she said she was Native American. A lot of motherfuckers think they Native American too. See, she may not have been lying. A lot of people be like, I got Indian in my family. Be careful if you think the Indian in your family is Cherokee, be suspect about that shit. Yeah, I'm part Cherokee. Are you? Cherokee, if you talk to the first peoples, they be like, that's the most counterfeited of all tribes. is the fucking Cherokee tribe. So she thought she was probably Cherokee or some shit. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people, black people, be thinking that like we part Native American too. Like yeah, my great grandma. Your great grandma was light skinned. She was mixed black and white. She didn't have a drop of Native American blood, but she filled out the paperwork that she was Indian. Now she got all these benefits. That's what it is. Yeah, a lot of black people think Native American ain't Native American either. See what I'm saying? So yeah, that DNA test is some real shit. Like I have actual Native American blood in me because that's what it said, right? But a lot of black people, like I've got actual genetic markers of indigenous people. A lot of black people don't got that shit. The Indian you thought in your family was just a light-skinned person. So just think about that. So that's why I can kind of forgive Elizabeth Warren on that front, especially since she owned it. She owned it. You know what I'm saying? That's all you can ask from somebody, right? But in the meantime, what's necessary, speaking of Native Americans, is I think it's ironic that conquest made this sick-ass empire on He's gonna do be denying that shit. Look. That's for Mexicans to call out. I ain't got nothing to do with that, right? But what I think is interesting is it's very powerful. This empire was built on the bones of the Native Americans, and now you got to think like Native Americans to save this empire from becoming bones, from becoming rubble, from becoming dust. The Hopi have long predicted that America was going to fall. The Hopi have been said that shit. You see what I'm saying? So it's one of those things where Native American thought process, Native American ideals, the indigenous ways are the ways that need to be applied right now if we're going to save the planet from destruction. You know what I'm saying? There's been indigenous lawsuits for the longest time towards the Brazilian government to stop that deforestation shit that they on. You know what I mean? So now it's going to take more than that. I think the world going to have to turn against the president of Brazil now that he's burning the lungs of the fucking planet. It's a real thing. You see what I'm saying? But we have to put on our boots and get going in terms of rebuilding and remaking this world. That's the beauty of human beings. We can do in 1 year what it would take nature 100 years to do. If a whole bunch of motherfuckers got out there planting trees like they did with the Greenbelt movement under Wangari Maathai, if a whole bunch of scientists got their minds together, if a whole bunch of MIT's guys got their minds together and said, how do we actually create machines big enough to clean up this plastic? We gonna clean that shit up. We can save the world. Just because it's fucked up. In fact, this might be part of our growing curve. People don't ever think this actually might be part of our growing curve as a species. We might be on like destiny to be like an intergalactic kind of species, right? So we're gonna have to terraform other planets. Hypothetically, like this is the nerd in me talking, right? So we have to terraform other planets. How do you know we aren't supposed to start with this one? We're gonna have to start with this one. And the only reason why we'll have to do it is because we destroy it. See what I'm saying? So to save our own asses, we will have to reconstruct our own biosphere. See what I'm saying? That's how I take hope out of this situation. And the wave that Trump is putting forth is going to have a counter wave. We got to make sure that that counter wave is a lesson learned from history to make sure that we're doing the right thing with the very things that are given to this planet that are all lent to us. None of that shit really belongs to us. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I got to say. If Trump is the Antichrist, then you got to be the embodiment of love and hope and healing energy in order to make sure that that force gets counterbalanced. And he's really kicking into gear the desire to want to be those very things. Don't despair, folks. We got a lot of work to do. We do, but we could do it. Till next time, folks, I am Theo E.J. Wilson. Thank y'all for joining me. Yeah, I'm about to lead us up here. Comment, share, follow, hit that subscribe button. Y'all have been wonderful. That's a word now. All right. Holla back. Peace.